The pizza guy had a gun to his head and a duffel bag in his hands. His name tag said Brian. His uniform smelled like pepperoni and fear. The bank manager was staring at him through bulletproof glass, trying to understand what was happening. Behind Brian, 3 men in ski masks stood with weapons drawn. One of them pressed the barrel harder against Brian's skull and said, "Tell her to open the vault or I blow your brains out right here." Brian's voice shook when he repeated it. The manager's finger hovered over the silent alarm button. It was 2:17 p.m. on August 9, 1992, at First National Bank on Coleman Boulevard in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. What started as a routine pizza delivery had turned into a 6-hour hostage crisis that would leave 17 people trapped inside, and one delivery driver facing charges he never saw coming. The men who took over the bank had planned this for 3 months. They knew the security systems. They knew the shift rotations. They knew exactly when the armored car made its pickup. What they didn't plan for was Brian Chen, 23 years old, showing up with 2 large pepperonis at exactly the wrong moment. And what Brian didn't know was that the pizza order itself was part of the setup, a way to get someone inside to unlock the door. He was never supposed to be a victim. He was supposed to be an accomplice. And by the time the police figured out the truth, it would be too late to save his reputation. Subscribe now and leave in the comments. What city are you watching from? Brian Chen had been delivering pizzas for Marco's Pizza for 8 months. It was a college job, something to pay rent while he finished his degree in computer science at Charleston Southern University. He worked Tuesday through Saturday, 4 p.m. to midnight, sometimes later on weekends. The money wasn't great, but the tips were decent, and his manager let him take home leftover pizza at closing. August 9th was a Saturday. Brian's shift started at noon because 2 other drivers called in sick. By 2 p.m., he'd done 11 deliveries. He was tired. His car smelled like garlic and grease. When the order came through for First National Bank, he didn't think twice about it. Banks ordered lunch all the time. Usually it was secretaries or loan officers working through their break. The order was for 2 large pepperoni pizzas, $42. The caller had paid with a credit card over the phone, so Brian didn't need to collect money. Just deliver and go. He loaded the pizzas into the thermal bag, drove the 4 miles to Coleman Boulevard, and pulled into the bank parking lot at 2:14 p.m. There were 6 cars in the lot, normal for a Saturday afternoon. The bank closed at 3 on weekends, so this was probably the last rush of customers. Brian grabbed the pizzas, walked to the front entrance, and pulled the door. It was locked. He knocked, waited. A woman in a blue blazer appeared behind the glass. She pointed at the clock and mouthed, "We're closed." Brian held up the pizzas and pointed at the receipt taped to the box. She shook her head, said, "We didn't order anything." Brian pulled out his phone to check the order. That's when he heard the footsteps behind him. 3 men appeared from behind a delivery van parked near the side entrance. They moved fast, smooth, like they'd rehearsed it. All 3 wore black ski masks, black jackets, black gloves. One carried a shotgun, one carried a revolver, one carried a canvas duffel bag. The one with the shotgun grabbed Brian by the collar and pressed the barrel against his temple. He said, "Drop the pizzas and open that door." Brian dropped the thermal bag. Pizza boxes hit concrete. The woman inside saw what was happening and screamed, turned to run toward the back. The man with the revolver fired 1 shot into the door. The bulletproof glass spiderwebbed but didn't break. The sound echoed across the parking lot. Dogs started barking in the neighborhood behind the bank. The gunman yelled at the woman through the glass. He said, "You open this door right now or I execute this kid in front of everyone." The woman froze. Her hand was on the alarm button. The gunman saw it and fired another round. This one hit the door frame 2 inches from her face. She pulled her hand back, pressed the unlock button. The door buzzed. The man holding Brian shoved him forward, said, "Get inside." Brian stumbled through the entrance. The 3 men followed. The door locked behind them. And that's when Brian saw the other 16 people inside First National Bank. All of them about to become hostages. All of them thinking Brian was part of this. Inside the lobby, 11 customers and 5 employees stood frozen. The oldest was a man in his 70s, waiting to cash a Social Security check. The youngest was a 9-year-old girl with her mother. The gunman with the shotgun fired 1 round into the ceiling. Acoustic tiles exploded. Everyone hit the floor. He yelled, "Nobody moves and nobody dies." The man with the duffel bag threw it at the teller closest to the counter, a young woman named Jessica Price, 26 years old, 8 months pregnant. He told her to fill it, everything from her drawer, now. Jessica's hands were shaking so badly she could barely open the cash drawer. She started pulling out bills, 20s, 50s, hundreds. The man with the revolver moved through the lobby, lining people up against the wall. He pointed at Brian and said, "You too." Brian said, "I'm not with them. I'm just delivering pizza." The gunman laughed. He said, "Sure you are, kid. Now sit down and shut up." Brian sat. He looked at the other hostages. They were all looking back at him, some with fear, some with anger. An older man in a business suit muttered, "You brought them here." Brian said, "No. No, I didn't. I swear." But nobody believed him. And when the police arrived 6 minutes later and surrounded the building, they wouldn't believe him either. The first patrol car arrived at 2:23 p.m. Officer David Monroe was responding to a reported shots fired when he saw the broken glass and the pizza boxes on the sidewalk. He radioed for backup and approached cautiously. Through the front window, he could see people sitting on the floor, hands on their heads, 3 armed men pacing, and one person in a pizza uniform sitting with the hostages. Monroe called it in. Armed robbery in progress. Multiple suspects. Multiple hostages. Possible inside accomplice. That last part was about Brian. From the outside, it looked like Brian had let them in. Within 12 minutes, 8 police cars surrounded the bank. Within 20 minutes, SWAT was staging 2 blocks away. Within 30 minutes, FBI was notified and en route. And at exactly 2:47 p.m., hostage negotiator Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell made the first call. The phone inside the bank rang 4 times. Then one of the gunmen picked up. His voice was calm. Too calm. He said, "This is Danny. Who am I talking to?" Mitchell introduced herself, asked if anyone was hurt. Danny said, "Not yet. Depends on you." Mitchell asked what he needed. Danny laid it out clean. $300,000 cash, a helicopter, fuel for 200 miles, and immunity from prosecution. Mitchell wrote it down. She knew none of it was happening, but she said, "Okay, we can talk about that, but it's going to take time." Danny said, "How much time?" Mitchell said, "A few hours, maybe more. Helicopters don't just appear. Banks have procedures for large withdrawals." Danny laughed. He said, "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know you're stalling?" Mitchell said, "I'm not stalling. I'm being realistic. If you want what you're asking for, you need to give me time to make it happen." Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Fine. You got 2 hours. At 5 p.m. I start shooting 1 hostage every 30 minutes, starting with the pizza boy." Inside the bank, Brian sat against the wall trying to process what he'd just heard. The pizza boy. They were going to kill him first. He looked at the gunman called Danny, tried to read his face through the ski mask. Couldn't see anything. Danny hung up the phone and turned to the other 2 gunmen. One was called Razor, the other was called T. Those were the only names they used. Never real names. Never anything that could identify them later. Razor was the one with the shotgun. Tall, maybe 6'3", heavy build, moved like someone who'd done time. T was shorter, wiry, nervous energy. He kept pacing back and forth, looking out the windows, checking sight lines. Danny was clearly the leader. He spoke calmly, gave orders in a low voice, kept everyone under control. He walked over to Brian and crouched down in front of him. He said, "What's your name?" Brian said, "Brian Chen." Danny said, "Brian Chen. You having a bad day, Brian?" Brian didn't answer. Danny laughed. He said, "Yeah, me too. But here's the thing, Brian. You're gonna help us out. You're gonna be our insurance policy. Because right now the cops think you're one of us. And we're gonna keep it that way," Brian said. "But I'm not. I didn't know anything about this." Danny said, "Doesn't matter what you know. Matters what they think. And they think you opened that door for us." Brian started to argue. Danny put a finger to his lips, said, "Save your breath. You're gonna need it." At 3:15 p.m., Lieutenant Mitchell received a call from FBI Special Agent Robert Torres. He was on scene now, taking over command. Torres had 22 years with the Bureau, 16 of those in crisis negotiation. He'd handled 4 bank robberies, 3 prison riots, and 1 domestic terrorism incident in Atlanta. His success rate was 91%. He listened to the recording of Mitchell's first call with Danny. Then he pulled Brian Chen's background. What came back was clean. No arrests, no warrants, no known association with criminal activity. But Torres had seen this before. Clean backgrounds didn't mean clean hands. Sometimes the best accomplices were the ones nobody suspected. He made a note to investigate Brian's financials. Check for recent deposits, unusual spending, anything that suggested he'd been paid to help with this job. At 3:30, Torres called the bank. Danny answered. Torres introduced himself, said he was here to help resolve this peacefully. Danny said, "I already talked to someone." Torres said, "I know, but I'm in charge now. And I'm here to tell you we're working on your requests. We have the money. We're coordinating with a private helicopter service. But these things take time." Danny said, "You got until 5. Torres said, "I need more than that." Danny said, "You got what I gave you." Torres tried a different approach. He said, "Let's talk about the hostages. You've got 17 people in there. Some of them are elderly. Some are kids. If you let a few go as a show of good faith, I can buy you more time with my superiors." Danny considered it. Then he said, "Okay, I'll let 3 go. But I choose who?" Torres said, "That's fair." "Which 3? Danny said, "The old man, the pregnant woman, and the kid." Torres felt relief wash over him. Those were the 3 most vulnerable. If he could get them out, survival odds for everyone else went up significantly. He said, "Okay." "When?" Danny said, "Right now. Send someone to the door, unarmed. We'll release them." Torres gave the order. A female officer in plain clothes approached the entrance with her hands visible. The door opened. Out walked 71-year-old Richard Palmer. Then Jessica Price, the pregnant teller. Then 9-year-old Emma Santos with her mother right behind her. Danny hadn't said the mother, but he let her go anyway. 4 people. Torres counted that as a win. The officer escorted them to safety. Paramedics checked them immediately. Richard Palmer had high blood pressure and was dehydrated. Jessica Price was having contractions, stress-induced. Emma Santos was in shock but physically unharmed. Her mother, Linda Santos, couldn't stop shaking. Torres interviewed each of them separately. Asked about the suspects, about weapons, about the layout inside, and about Brian Chen. Richard Palmer said the pizza kid. He brought them in, opened the door for them. Jessica Price said, "I don't know. Maybe. It happened so fast." Linda Santos said he looked as scared as the rest of us. But he was wearing a pizza uniform. Why would they bring their own guy in a uniform? Torres wrote everything down. The stories conflicted. That meant Brian was either a very good actor or actually innocent. Torres needed more information. He called the bank again at 4 p.m. Danny answered. Torres thanked him for releasing the hostages. Danny said, "Don't thank me yet. You got 1 hour." Torres said, "We're getting the helicopter. It's coming from Charlotte. Should be here by 6. Danny said, "I said 5. Torres said, "I know. But this is the best we can do, unless you want us to skip the helicopter and just have a shootout right here." Danny went quiet. Torres pressed. He said, "You seem like a smart guy. You planned this. You've got demands. That means you want to survive this. I want that too. So work with me. Give me until 6 and I'll give you what you want." Danny said 6:01 and people start dying, starting with Pizza Boy. The line went dead. Inside the bank, the remaining 13 hostages sat in a tight group near the teller stations. Brian was separated from them, sitting alone near the vault door. Razor stood guard over him with the shotgun. Brian tried to make eye contact with the other hostages, tried to signal that he wasn't part of this, but they wouldn't look at him, except for one person, a woman in her 40s. Dark hair, business suit. She'd been watching Brian since this started. Her name was Catherine Wells. She was a loan officer at the bank, 12 years with First National. She knew every procedure, every protocol, every security measure. And she knew something the police didn't know yet. She knew that pizza order was placed from inside the bank. from an employee computer 2 weeks ago by someone who had the password to the ordering system, someone who worked here. Catherine had seen the order in the system logs when she was reviewing expenses. She thought it was strange at the time but didn't report it. Now she realized what it meant. Someone on the inside had set this up, and that someone was still in this room. She looked around at the other 4 employees, 3 tellers and 1 assistant manager. Which one of them had made that order? Which one of them had betrayed everyone? She caught Brian's eye, mouthed the words you didn't know. Brian stared at her, nodded slightly. Catherine made a decision. When this was over, she would tell the police everything. But first, she needed to figure out who the real accomplice was. At 4:30 p.m., Agent Torres received confirmation that a helicopter was inbound from Charlotte. ETA 5:45. He called the bank, told Danny the good news. Danny said, "I want proof." Torres said, "What kind of proof?" Danny said, "Put the pilot on the phone." Torres hesitated, then he agreed. He patched through to the helicopter pilot, Marcus Reed, former military, now flew for a private charter service. Reed confirmed he was 15 minutes out, full tank, ready to land wherever they needed him. Danny said, "Good. Land in the parking lot, facing south, rotors running." Reed said, "Understood." Danny hung up. Torres turned to his tactical team. SWAT commander Jeff Brennan was standing by with 12 operators. Brennan said, "If they try to leave with hostages, we take the shot." Torres said, "No, we let them go." Brennan said, "What?" Torres said, "We let them get on that helicopter. We track them. We apprehend them later. We don't risk 13 lives for 3 suspects." Brennan didn't like it, but he nodded. Torres was in command. At 5:42 p.m., the helicopter appeared over the tree line. The sound of rotors echoed through downtown Mount Pleasant. Danny watched through the window. Then he made one more call. He said, "We're coming out in 5 minutes. We're taking 5 hostages with us. If anyone tries anything, they all die." Torres said, "No one will try anything." Danny said, "Good. We'll release them once we're clear." Torres said, "Where?" Danny said, "You'll know when it happens." Then he hung up for the last time. Danny pointed at 5 hostages: Brian Chen, Catherine Wells, 2 male customers named Marcus Jordan and Paul Lee, and 1 teller named Amy Foster. He said, "You 5. Up. Now." They stood. Danny handed each of them a zip tie, said, "Tie the person next to you. Wrists behind their back." They did. Then T checked the ties, made sure they were tight. Razor kept his shotgun trained on the group. Danny said, "Here's how this works. We walk out together, straight to the helicopter. You do exactly what I say. You don't run. You don't scream. You don't try to be a hero. Because if you do, I will shoot you in the back and leave you on the pavement. Everyone understand?" They nodded. Danny opened the front door. The 5 hostages walked out first. Then Danny. Then Razor. Then T. They moved in a tight formation across the parking lot. 50 yards to the helicopter. Police snipers had clear shots, but nobody took them. Torres had given the order. "Stand down, let them go." The helicopter rotors kicked up dust and trash. The sound was deafening. Danny shoved the 5 hostages into the cargo area, climbed in behind them. Razor and T followed. Danny yelled at the pilot, "Go. South. Now." The helicopter lifted off at 5:49 p.m., 8 minutes after the deadline. Torres watched it disappear over the tree line. Then he radioed the tracking unit. A police helicopter was already in the air 2 miles back. Visual confirmed. They wouldn't lose them. The helicopter flew south for 11 minutes. Then the pilot received new instructions from Danny. Land in the clearing ahead. The pilot saw it. An open field off Highway 17. No buildings, no roads, just grass and trees. He sat down at 6 p.m. exactly. The moment the skids touched ground, Danny opened the door and shoved the 5 hostages out. He yelled at the pilot, "Stay here 5 minutes, then go. Don't follow us." The pilot nodded. Danny, Razor, and T jumped out and ran toward the tree line. They disappeared into the woods. The hostages lay in the grass, hands still zip-tied. Catherine Wells was the first to sit up. She said, "Is anyone hurt?" Everyone said no. Brian said, "We need to get these ties off." Paul Lee said, "I can reach yours if you reach mine." They worked together, pulling at the plastic until it snapped. Within 3 minutes, all 5 were free. The police helicopter appeared overhead 60 seconds later. Officers rappelled down, secured the area. The hostages were taken back to Mount Pleasant by ground units. By 6:30 p.m., all 17 hostages were safe, but Danny, Razor, and T were gone. The manhunt lasted 4 days. Police searched a 6-square-mile area around the drop site, brought in tracking dogs, thermal imaging, nothing. It looked like they'd vanished. But on day 3, a tip came in. A gas station attendant in Walterboro reported 3 men matching the description buying food and cigarettes, paid cash, drove off in a stolen Honda Civic. Police ran the plates, found the car abandoned outside a motel in Savannah. Inside room 14, they found Danny, Razor, and T. All 3 were asleep. They didn't resist arrest. In custody, their real names came out. Danny was Daniel Cross, 34, from Jacksonville. Former bank employee fired 3 years ago. Razor was Marcus White, 39, with 6 priors for armed robbery. T was Thomas Rivera, 27, no record until now. Daniel Cross was the mastermind. He'd worked at First National Bank from 87 to 89. He knew the systems, knew the schedules, and he had the passwords. The pizza order was placed using his old employee login. He'd been planning this since the day they fired him. Marcus White and Thomas Rivera were recruited 6 months before the robbery. All 3 faced federal charges: kidnapping, armed robbery, use of a firearm in commission of a felony, assault. They went to trial in March 1993. All 3 were convicted. Daniel Cross got 35 years. Marcus White got 30 years. Thomas Rivera got 25. None of them will be eligible for parole until at least 2010. Brian Chen faced charges too, initially. The DA wanted to prosecute him as an accomplice. But Catherine Wells came forward with the evidence: the pizza order logs, the employee password, the timeline that proved Brian couldn't have known. His charges were dropped in October 1992. But the damage was done. Brian's name had been in every newspaper, his face on every news broadcast. People remembered him as the pizza guy who helped rob the bank. He couldn't get another job, couldn't finish his degree. He dropped out of Charleston Southern in November and moved to Oregon to live with his uncle. He changed his name in '94, stopped talking about what happened. The other hostages had different outcomes. Richard Palmer passed away in '95 from unrelated heart disease. Jessica Price had her baby in September, a healthy boy. She named him Daniel, unaware of the irony. Linda and Emma Santos moved to Florida. Emma is 29 now, works as a teacher, doesn't remember much about that day. Catherine Wells stayed at First National until she retired in 2008. She still wonders which employee made that pizza order. The logs showed the username but never revealed who actually typed it in. That secret died with Daniel Cross. Marcus Jordan and Paul Lee both left South Carolina within a year. Amy Foster quit banking entirely, became a kindergarten teacher, said she wanted to work somewhere safe, somewhere with no money and no guns. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell and Agent Robert Torres both retired from law enforcement. Mitchell in 2001, Torres in 2009. Neither of them ever forgot August 9, 1992, the day they let 3 armed men fly away in a helicopter, the day it actually worked. Subscribe now and leave in the comments, what city are you watching from?